there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokémon community, discovering the 6 Pokémon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, Merry by name, Merry by nature, a host and commentator for the Pokémon Video Game Championship Series, and a content creator, otherwise known as Chazingdra. And this week, as every week, I very much hope my guest and I can make your day merry, because I have the pleasure of being joined by Tom Rocks Maths, otherwise known as Dr Tom Crawford. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very excited to talk Pokemon and potentially maths, my two favourite things.
I think we will cover both of those. It will be a Poke Maths episode. Before I sort of talk about how I know you, for anyone who's not so familiar with you, Tom, can you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Absolutely. Also a content creator, mainly focused on YouTube, Tom Rocks Maths on all the socials, and it's basically me getting far too excited talking about maths. Would be the easiest way to explain my content. My most popular videos are me taking high school maths exams from around the world. Obviously I have the Pokeball tattoos on the arm. I'm sure a few of you have spotted already if you didn't know they were there. I have also made quite a few videos looking at the maths of Pokemon and the ridiculousness of the Pokedex and various other things of that nature. Teach maths at university, but also play a lot of Pokemon in my spare time. Yes.
Now, as I was explaining to you before we started recording, Tom, there was a moment where it felt like the universe was telling me to get you on the show. A few months ago, sometimes I will have a late lunch in order to watch Countdown, which is a fun game show we have here in the UK. It involves creating words out of some random letters and reaching a solution via some numbers that are presented in anagrams and things like that. And lo and behold, one day it's not one of the usual hosts, Rachel Riley, doing the lesson of the numbers, but it's Tom Rocks Maths. And at the time, I didn't know that you were Tom Rocks Maths, but I did vaguely recognise your face, and I thought, I think he's called Dr Tom Crawford, and I think we overlapped at university at some point. And there it is in the credits, Dr Tom Crawford. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So I looked you up online, and in your X banner at the top of your profile, you've got a picture of that very Pokeball tattoo that you've got on your arm. And that led me down this rabbit hole. I then discovered your YouTube videos. I saw some of those Pokemon-flavoured maths videos that you talked about just there. And yeah, I was just in a position where I was thinking, I want to start broadening out and go beyond the core Pokemon community and start getting people who are out there in the public eye and who happen to have an interest in Pokemon on the show. And so thank you so much for your interest in being on the show.
No, of course. Like, as you say, it was one of those where you messaged me. I was like, I remember this name. Like, we did indeed overlap at university. Like, and then I saw some of the cool stuff you were doing, and I was like, yes, like, this is a great chance to overlap, as I said, literally my two favourite things, like maths and Pokemon. Like, let's do it.
Amazing. I wouldn't say that maths is my second favourite thing behind Pokemon, but maybe after this recording, it will be, so no pressure, Tom. But I'm sure you do a fantastic job of selling.
Is that the challenge here?
Yeah, exactly. Well then, Tom, shall we do this?
Let's do it.
Fantastic. All right, what we're going to start with here is your first memory of doing maths for fun in Year 4.
So this is a question I get asked a lot by students. Because I feel like, you know, you reach that point where, as a student, you're doing subjects at school, and then suddenly you have to decide, as a 17-year-old, what degree am I going to take? What am I going to spend the next 3 to 4 years of my life thinking about, with nothing else? And so I think some students are kind of unsure about whether to do maths versus engineering versus physics, at least the ones that I'm interacting with. And so I'm very used to them sort of saying to me, you know, well, how did you know you wanted to do maths? And my answer is literally to point back to, as you said, the memory I have of being in Year 4. So this is my oldest memory of doing maths at school. I think probably pretty much my oldest memory from school, in fact. And I think to me it sort of captures why I've spent the rest of my life doing maths problems. Because we were doing long multiplication for the very first time. So, you know, the teacher has introduced the concept and said us like a series of exercises. You know, it's like work through pages 20 and 22 in the workbook kind of thing. And then we were told to carry on and do like an extra page or something for homework. And I remember in the class, first of all, just really, really enjoying going through the problems. And then I remember getting home and then continuing to work through the problems. You know, I'm up to like page 40 now. I'm just having so much fun. And I specifically remember like my mum having this conflict because she would like come up to my bedroom and be like, you need to go to bed. It's like, you know, 9 o'clock or whatever. But at the same time, she could see that I was just sitting and solving maths problems and literally having the best time ever. And so you could tell that she was like torn between, he's staying up late, but at the same time he's doing something. He's literally doing homework and he's learning and he's having fun. And so I think just for a host of reasons, that memory just kind of sticks in my head, and I think it kind of captures like the enjoyment I get just from solving. And I think the enjoyment, a lot of people who enjoy maths, or a lot of people who like maths, right, one of the big enjoyment or one of the main reasons you enjoy the subject is precisely that. It's when you learn a new technique, you learn a method, and you're able to use it to solve like potentially quite tough looking problems, and you're kind of like, you get like sort of, it's reinforced because you're checking your answers and you're seeing that you're still doing it, it's still going well. Of course, there's the opposite when it doesn't go well, and perhaps that's why some people end up disliking the subject. But I just think that whole memory and sort of like idea really like captures my enjoyment of the subject. And then sort of come back to my original point, like I never felt like I had to choose to do maths at A-level or at university or beyond even. It was like, if it's an option, if one of the subjects I can continue to study is maths, then I'm doing that. And if there's something else, then I'll worry about it. But it was just like, it was almost like the default option was maths, and I didn't really have to make a decision or a choice around that.
That's fascinating. For the benefit of anyone who maybe isn't familiar with the UK schooling system, roughly how old are we talking when we say year 4?
Would that be like eight, maybe 8 years old, something like that?
I think it would be 8 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a hilarious image that you and kind of a. I could see the dilemma your mum was in, but as you say, a pretty nice position to be in, where that is what is the concern for your mum, and why you're staying up late. So, I guess when it came to choosing subjects at university specifically, was there ever any part of you that was thinking, do I do something mathematically based, like engineering or something, or physics, or going beyond pure maths? Or was it always going to be you just wanted to do maths in its purest form?
It's interesting you asked that, because I remember going to University Open Day, and we had 2 speakers, and one of them talked about prime numbers and patterns and what we would call number theory. And then the other one talked about launching rockets and kind of like aerodynamics and things. And I was with my dad, and he said that he was like, oh, that talk on the rocket was really cool. And I was like, oh, I actually preferred the other one. I preferred the numbers and the patterns. So I think in that sense, like as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, I was kind of drawn to maths in its purest form. But then, once I actually went to university and started studying all of that really theoretical, pure stuff, I actually realized that wasn't my favorite thing. And now, my PhD research and the kind of stuff I think about now is related to modeling. It's related to, for example, like climate science. It's related to the ocean. So it's very much actually trying to use maths to solve real world problems. So I think I actually underwent my own shift, sort of going through and being exposed to like the range of things that you can do with maths. But very much like, coming out of school, I was like convinced I was going to work on, these kind of very abstract, very what we would say like pure or theoretical maths problems, until I realized what that meant. And then I kind of went in the other direction. So maybe more towards a physics or engineering type structure and situation.
You could say your interest in maths evolved. And speaking of that, where does Pokémon come into things? So, talking about year 4 in particular at this point, where are we in terms of Pokémon when you are 8 years old? Are Red and Blue just out, or is it Generation 2?
So I think year 4 would have been like 1996, 97. So I think at that point, I'm pretty sure I would have been playing Pokémon. Like I got Pokémon Red with my pocket Game Boy as a Christmas present. I think either the year it came out or the year after it came out. So very much like one of the first adopters of the original game. And it's funny you mentioned about like my mum could have had other things to worry about me being up for. Like I definitely also got caught a lot like playing Pokemon under the duvet with like a little handheld torch, because obviously the Game Boy Pocket's not bright enough that you could actually play it in the dark, so you needed like a separate light source to shine on it. So there was like a whole thing going on there where I definitely get caught playing Pokemon late at night. So yeah, so maybe she was just happy I was doing maths instead of that. But yeah, that actually leads really nicely into my first Pokemon. If we're at the point where I reveal my first Pokemon, I don't know. But it's...
I think we are. I think it's...
Okay. Yeah, so my first Pokemon is, I think, a rather rogue Kingler.
Oh.
And the reason for this is because when I was first playing, at the age of like 7 or 8, I couldn't get past the third. No, it couldn't have been the third. Or maybe, I feel like it was the third. I think I couldn't get past, was it Lieutenant Surge? Was that his name?
Yeah.
The electric dude, right? With the spiky hair, the jazzy haircut and everything, yeah? And all these electric Pokemon. So I couldn't get past him. I think I ended up picking Bulbasaur on my first playthrough, as advised by my official Nintendo strategy guide.
Yes.
So Bulbasaur was the best, yeah. So I had my Bulbasaur. I think it was probably an Ivysaur at that point, not quite yet the Venusaur. And I just couldn't do it. I just kept failing and I got really annoyed. And so my friend, who was further ahead in the game, who lived around the corner from me, we did like a link cable trade. And so he sent me... I think it was like a level 25 Kingler or something. And then I just basically remember having this Kingler throughout the whole game. And that was the level 100 or 99, right? It maxed out. I got Kingler to the absolute maximum by the end. And had Vice Grip, I think, or some moves named similarly to that just destroyed everything in its path. And so for that, yeah, because that's kind of like my original kind of I think, let's say, slightly more unique Pokemon that I had in the very first playthrough, and it got me through that tough situation when I really got stuck. And sort of, I don't think I'd figured out types yet. Looking back,
I was going to say
lots of because obviously it's a water type, right, against an electric. I don't know how it helped, but I don't know. I got this Kingler, and it wouldn't obey me because I didn't yet have the high enough badge and all that stuff. So it became a bit of a pain for a while. But I don't know. It was just one of those things where we just became best of friends, right? That was my go-to best friend in the Pokemon world, was my Kingler. So that would have to take... Yeah, not only is that my first main Pokemon memory, it has to take that first spot in the team.
Kingler. I love that. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure any guest on the show so far has chosen Kingler. That's a fascinating story. I guess, do you have any recollection at this point of what it was about Pokemon that spoke to you so much?
Oh, that is a good question. So I think the idea of trying to collect, right? It's kind of... I think that is I imagine this is the same for a lot of people, right? It's the idea that not only are you training and fighting and leveling up, which I think is a key ingredient in almost any good game, or at least any game I've ever played, right? It's that idea of developing your skills and growing and becoming stronger and all those things. But it was I think I was just really drawn to the idea of the collecting aspect of it as well. I think for me that was just a lot of fun, and I can also see it appearing in other areas of my life. I don't know if this is deeper than I thought this question would go, but so I enjoy traveling, and a few years ago I realized that I had been very fortunate to visit quite a high number of different countries, just through travel opportunities and then invited talks and various other cool things I've been able to do. And so now it's become a thing where I'm I now want to try and visit, at least 100 countries around the world. But in sort of a similar, collecting kind of way. And my friends call me out on this, and they're oh, you can't just visit somewhere for 2 days and then, claim you've been there. And I'm obviously fully aware. I'm not claiming I know even anything about the country, but I kind of like that idea of just I see it as just a diversity of experiences, of just spending a few days in somewhere that's just different. The arbitrary division of countries feels one way to define that. But I think that idea of collecting, it sort of perhaps is common between this kind of idea of me enjoying to travel to new places and also my enjoyment of Pokemon.
I guess the natural next question here is, so how many countries so far?
I think I just hit 90.
Oh,
Actually.
wow.
Yeah. I think I just hit 90, and I've got like 2 or 3 more planned for the rest of this year, which will be new as well. So hopefully in 2026 I might hit the 100. And then obviously I'll set another new arbitrary target of like 150 or something, but
Yeah. Yeah.
150 does feel
one.
appropriate, right? And then I could like
Exactly.
line each country up with its Pokemon.
Exactly what I was going to say. You're going to have to get 151 in there to make it all the originals. But
Exactly,
okay, interesting.
exactly.
So I've got both of these threads running now with Pokemon and with maths. Well, everybody, if you're enjoying this chat with Tom, please do like and subscribe. It means a huge amount and really does go such a long way, as Tom, as a fellow content creator, can attest to. But we've got so much more conversation to have. So now we'll go from there into your GCSE results and the realization that you were clever.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I always enjoyed school, right? I worked hard. There was quite a clue in that first story of, doing maths problems for fun. Like, so yeah, I enjoyed school. I enjoyed learning. I think as a result of that enjoyment, it meant that, I was good at traditional school subjects and things. But then... and I remember, being in top sets and things at high school. But then I suppose when you get, your GCSEs are like that first proper qualification that you do in the UK, right? You've had your, what we call the SATs, not the American SAT, the SATs that we do in like year 6 and maybe year 9, I forget now. So we have those things, but like GCSEs feel like the first proper qualification you do at the age 16. And so, yeah, I think sort of getting those results and sort of having, I guess, an external body or external, organization qualification that wasn't just my teachers telling me that I was good at subjects, I think was kind of where I got to a point, I remember talking to some of my teachers after my GCSE results, and they were talking about, have you thought about... obviously I thought about university, but they were like, you should be really looking at the top universities, not just in the UK, but across the world. They're like, you should, you have the potential to do this. And they sort of, I think, planted that seed in my brain, getting the GCSE results. And then, the seed had been planted then to be like, right, I want to go somewhere like, that is the best place to go to. I'd sort of set myself that challenge, I think, and that goal. And it's sort of, I think that really came to fruition with the GCSE results.
So you're now around sort of twice the age that you were when you were talking about your first topics there. And
yes.
I mean, has everything just continued in a similar vein at this point? Between then year 4 and now GCSEs, have you just continued to thrive and get satisfaction out of doing maths? Has there been any wavering in that?
No, I think maths was continued to be my favorite subject. I think by that point, definitely by GCSE, I had identified subjects I also didn't enjoy. But I think being a very logical, strategy-oriented thinker, through the sort of mathematical training, let's say, I had figured out, I didn't like English literature, but I had realised that, you just had to have an opinion and just back it up with attempted justification. And for GCSE English, the examiners love that. So I was quite strategic, I think. That's not in any way doing a disservice to English as a subject and the students. But I think just my approach to it was I knew how to do well in the exams. I was quite strategic and quite logical in that sense. I definitely don't think I would have been able to go any further, for example, with English or history or anything like that, because I just didn't feel like I had the drive and the passion and the interest. But I was sort of had identified I preferred solving problems, scientific subjects in particular, rather than writing essays. So I think that was kind of the main shift maybe that happened. Once you kind of at age 11 go to high school in the UK and you begin to actually separate out the subjects, because in primary school, of course, you're kind of just doing everything all the time and your teacher just moves between it, throughout the day. But then, you from year 7 onwards, sort of 11, 12, etc., you're actually going to different lessons and you begin to differentiate more between subjects. And so I definitely found myself veering towards mathsy, sciencey stuff, still being able to do humanities and writing, but just not finding it as enjoyable. And as I said, I think my approach to it was very mathematical, actually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so that's the math side of things. What about the Pokemon side of things? Are you still playing the games up to GCSE age? Are you still enjoying them?
Absolutely, yeah. So I had a little bit of a gap. I don't think I played Generation 2. I have since played it, but I don't think, despite absolutely loving Pokemon Red. So I had Red and my brother had Blue, right? My younger brother. So we could do the link cable trading and get them all and all that. Although I do remember it was like the classic, we will trade our Haunters across, right, to get Gengar and the other ones, and then you trade them back, right? Because you want your one that you've trained up. And when he got my Haunter and then became Gengar, he's like, I'm not trading back. Yours is way better. Like, it was 10 levels higher, and he was like, nope, it's mine now. And I remember like complaining to mum and dad, and they were like, we don't understand. I don't know what's going on. Like, stop shouting at each other. Like, we're not getting involved. So to this day, I've never forgiven him for stealing my 10 level higher Gengar, and I have to be stuck with his terrible one. Yeah, despite enjoying it so much, I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's... Am I correct in thinking that you needed a Game Boy Color or a slightly more advanced console to get Gold and Silver? Because I'm just wondering if that's maybe...
I think Gold and Silver were Game Boy Color, yeah.
Yeah, because I never had a Game Boy Color. Because I think the Game Boy Pocket was my first console, but then I think around that age I would have got a PlayStation 2 maybe. Just a few years after that, like around the year 2000 or so. Maybe, or I know I did. I also had a PlayStation 1, but I think I kind of, whilst I loved Pokemon, and I would actually still return it. I remember playing it like possibly like once a year. I'd just like crack it out and just like play through in a couple of weeks and just redo it. Definitely did that many times. But yeah, I think I also got into other video games around that time as well, and sort of it felt to me like the PlayStation, because I was more of a PlayStation kid in that sense. Rather than, Nintendo 64 or anything. Those felt more like social, playing a lot of, whether it was like sports games or like shooting games or whatever with my friends, all sat around a screen rather than sort of playing on the individual handheld console. So I think that's maybe that was probably like where there was the biggest dip, I might say, in my Pokemon video gaming career.
Just to expand on that, yeah, there are certain Pokemon that only evolve when you trade them with a friend, and then you trade them back to get the one that you traded to evolve. And it was exactly the same with me and my brother. I have an older brother. He had Red. I had Pokemon Blue. I think this is quite a familiar tale with siblings growing up during those early days of Pokemon. So, now let's introduce what's going to be the second Pokemon on your dream team alongside Kingler.
Yeah, so this one is going to be Butterfree. I have a Butterfree tattoo on my leg. So this is... I actually have the full evolution tree. So Butterfree was the first Pokemon tattoo that I got. Going back about 10 years ago now. And in the last year, I then added Caterpie and Metapod. So I have the three of them kind of wrapped around my calf. I think for a couple of reasons. So obviously it played quite a big role in the cartoon, right? The anime, sort of the original one. So again, I think I only really watched the original sort of first few. I wouldn't be able to tell you what seasons, but it used to be on a Saturday morning, sort of like, on kids' TV. And so I used to watch that. And I think Butterfree was obviously quite a big character there with Ash. And then also, I think ultimately why I ended up getting it as my first actual Pokemon-specific tattoo. Every time I play through a Pokemon game, I just always seem to end up with a Butterfree, like in my team. So it's like, because it's kind of one of them where they seem to be in most of the games, right? Like Caterpie seems to appear in most games, as in it's available to catch and things. And it's just the bug Pokemon, like classic, you get them early on, and then they're very like high powered for a very short period of time, right? Because you've got like a level 10 Pokemon that's a triple evolution, which is like insane. So like it kind of like is often, I found at least, kind of could be quite high powered in that early part of the game. It's just like, well, it got me through those early tricky parts, so I can't just throw it away now. And so I just think almost every time, whatever game I've played through, I end up with a Butterfree in sort of, the final team that's taking on the Elite Four or whatever equivalent, right, in that particular generation. So yeah, I think I just always had a bit of a soft spot. And plus, the classic, like, sleep powder followed by Psybeam is just an ultimate combo, right? Put them to sleep and hit them with a psychic move was just like, yeah, it got me out of many a scrape.
It's wonderful that you stuck by those bug-type Pokemon, because you say they appear early in the game, and then often they'll be replaced by Pokemon that are perhaps coming in stronger, but you stay loyal to it, and I appreciate that. And I do the same. I always try and fly the flag for those bug Pokemon and say, no, I'm sticking by your side. And quite literally, Butterfree is sticking by your side because it's stuck on your side, on your leg. So, wonderful. Butterfree is joining the team. We'll flutter over from there now into, okay, so your Oxford interview as an undergraduate.
So I think going on from my GCSE results and this kind of, I think, realization that I could go to a really good university, and, putting that idea in my head meant that I think my personality, the type of person I am, I was like, right, that's the new goal here, that's the challenge, that's what I want to do. And so I was looking between Oxford and Cambridge. And of course, in the UK system, you can only apply to one, so you have to pick. Which I think, as someone who now does admissions, that is quite important, because otherwise you just get the same people basically applying to both universities. So I remember going to the open days at both of them, and just generally felt like Oxford, I think it just seemed like a place I could picture myself living more than Cambridge, but more to do with the city rather than the university. Specifically, because the universities just felt like they were kind of the same. The interview, like, it's just that kind of moment that I think anyone who's been through that process, it kind of really sticks with you, because it's like really exciting, but at the same time, like, absolutely terrifying. Sort of, I just turned 18, like the week before was my birthday, and then I take the train down to Oxford. And then, you have these interviews and you walk into, the room with these classic, stereotypical mathematicians all sat there just kind of like staring at you. Not that they were trying to be intimidating, but you can't help but feel a little bit intimidated, in this glorious sort of wooden filled room with lots of old books and, the usual kind of Oxford and Cambridge vibes. But what I really remember about the whole experience, and this is something that I've been a big advocate for in recent years, around the advantage of an in-person admissions interview versus online, is I remember the morning of my first interview, right? So say my interview is at like 10 a.m. So I go and have breakfast and whatever, and say it's like 9:15, and I'm like, okay, I've got a bit of time to kill. And so, like being a sensible person, I was like, I go for a little bit of a walk. And I kind of remember walking around the gardens at St. John's College in Oxford, where I'd applied, and just seeing, all of these like 700-year-old buildings. It's like, this is just beautiful architecture, this incredible history and prestige. And I just remember thinking, like, right, if there was ever a time to bring your A game, like, this is it. Right, and just being like, I want to study here. Like, I want this. Like, this is, everything I've been building up to. And it kind of reminded me, as someone who spent most of my childhood playing football, and to be honest, I still do, right? And I've been fortunate to play in lots of cup finals. It felt very much the same. It was literally like that feeling of like, you're going out onto the pitch in the cup final, and you're like, right, this is it. We've worked hard all season to get to this point. This is, if there's a time to bring it, this is it. And I just remember that kind of feeling. But also at the same time, whilst being very excited and very terrified, there was like an element of like, this is just maths. You know how to do this. Like, there was sort of like let's say a quiet confidence, which I think I surprised myself with as a recently turned 18-year-old. Maybe it was the potential arrogance of youth. I don't know. But I think it was more like, just like a reassurance of being like, this is something you enjoy maths, you know how to think about problems, you've, without maybe realizing it, been training for this since year 4 and doing all those multiplication problems. And I just sort of, it's just, there's a lot of kind of feelings and emotion and good memories around that whole. I mean, obviously, right, I have the good memories because they liked me and I got in, and then have never really left the Oxford and Cambridge system since. So I'm obviously, I guess, looking back at it from that perspective versus someone else who maybe didn't have a good experience and felt overwhelmed by it. And I do, again, I've had these discussions with colleagues around the advantages of the remote interviews, doing online interviews, in that the candidates are now in a much more comfortable setting, so it's less intimidating. They can relax a bit more, hopefully be a little bit less nervous. But to me, as I say, it worked in my favor for sure. I think just actually being there and sort of like getting myself psyched up for like the big moment.
What do you recall about your interview itself?
I remember the question, and I think I can say this considering this was, 17 years ago now, so I don't think it would still be being used. So the question goes as follows. You have a standard chessboard. So you've got 64 squares on the chessboard. So obviously 32 black, 32 white, in the alternating pattern that hopefully we're all familiar with. But these individual squares are tiles, so they can be removed from the chessboard. So you could grab a black square and like take it off the board. And what we're going to do is take all 64 tiles off the board. So you now just have like an empty 8x8 grid and a pile of 32 black tiles and 32 white tiles. And then the question is, you have to put all of these tiles back on the board. And the only rule is, when you place a tile, it must be next to the same tiles it was next to originally. So if you were to sort of originally, pick one in the middle, so it's surrounded by 8 other tiles, it doesn't need to be in the exact same place, but it still needs to be touching those same 8 tiles. They could, of course, be in a different order, but they still need to all be touching. And that's true for every tile on the board. So you put them all back, but they must still be neighbours with the same tiles that they were neighbours with before. And the question is, how many different ways can you put the chessboard back together?
Well, go on then. How many?
All right. So this was one of the 2 questions. The other question was much longer and sort of wound everywhere. But this one, I think they threw at me at the end because we had like 5 or 10 minutes left. But the way I thought about it was to say, well, start with the corners because they're very unique. Because the corner pieces, right? Pick a corner piece. It only has 3 neighbours. So when you put the corner piece back, you've got 4 choices of where to put the corner piece. Because any previous corner piece, it's got to go back in a corner. It doesn't work otherwise. So you've got 4 choices of where to put the corner piece. And then once you've done that, you think about the 2 next to it. So directly horizontal and directly below it. And ignore the diagonal one for now. But of those 2, you've got a choice there. You can either put them back exactly as they were before, or flip them. Swap those 2 round. This is easier when you can draw it out.
I'm with you. I think, yeah.
Yeah, but then as soon as you've made that choice with those 2, everything else is actually fixed from that point onwards. Because and I began to kind of draw this out. I was sort of thinking through it, and I was like, right, well, I'll start with the corners. I've got 4 choices of which corner to put the piece in. But then it has to be next to the same 2, horizontally and vertically. And then once you've decided which way round to put those 2, I then started to think, well, the next one actually is fixed because of blah, blah, blah. And then the next one is also then fixed. And suddenly you realize the rest of the board is now decided for you. You actually have no choice. So you had 4 choices at the beginning and then multiplied by 2. Because for each of the 4, you could flip it one way or the other. So there's 8. And 8 was the answer. And I just kind of talked this through, not really knowing whether or not this was what they wanted. But I just remember sort of talking through kind of like that and drawing some scribbly pictures. And then just sort of my interviewer being like, yeah, no, that's correct. Good. All right. that's all from us. I was just like, okay, cool. Like, all right, I'm off. Good. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have been dismissed. But then, obviously a few years later, chatting to the same tutor, over like a formal dinner, and sort of asking whether they remember your interviews and stuff. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we remember. You were very confident about the chessboard thing. Unfortunately, you were correct, but because it can backfire, right? If you're a little bit too, but yeah, I don't know. I just kind of just thought it through. I just kind of, as you do with these things, you just think out loud. I just drew pictures, and I was sort of realizing it as I was doing it.
I think it goes to show just how level-headed you are able to keep under pressure, which is obviously, I guess, another thing that will have sung your praises in the interview. And of course, for anyone unfamiliar, Oxford and Cambridge University interviews, and I'm sure for interviews at other institutions around the world, certainly though Oxford and Cambridge have this reputation for very left field questions or having to apply your knowledge in a way that maybe you're not expecting, and that's a prime example of that. That's fascinating. Okay, now it's time to discover what's going to be the third Pokemon on your dream team alongside Butterfree and Kingler.
Yeah, so I think it's about time we had a legendary. So we're going to go Zapdos. It's going to be the third Pokemon. And Zapdos, so the reason I selected Zapdos, it's another one, it's the second one that I had tattooed. I don't have a Kingler tattoo, but I feel like now I might need to get a Kingler tattoo. But Zapdos was my favourite Pokemon card as a kid. So the collection you can see in the frame behind me, that's my original collection from the very first original Generation 1 set. And I remember somebody I was about 10 or 11 when I was collecting these, and I remember somebody else in maybe the year below me had a Zapdos, and when I saw that card, I was like, that is the coolest Pokemon card ever. And I remembered, I think I might have traded a Charizard for Zapdos. I have no regrets. Not like Charizard's worth 10 times the price now, but anyway. Yeah, as a 10-year-old, I was very happy, right? I was like, I need to get this Zapdos card. I just thought it was really cool. And so, yeah, that's sort of my love for Zapdos. I did, of course, have one in the game as well. It was always my favourite of the original Legendary Birds. Because I think you get, there are other fire Pokemon in there that are quite fun. So I think I was never that into Moltres. Articuno is also pretty cool, but like Ice is a bit more niche. So I think having a solid electric in there is always a good idea. And so, I think of the original kind of like Legendary Birds, in particular Zapdos was always the one I think that I would end up keeping in my actual team, playing through the game and doing the gym leaders and the Elite Four and stuff. Yeah.
So at this point, the cards come into the story. Are you mainly, as you're growing up, playing the games and just, collecting the cards here and there?
Yes. So I don't think I ever actually played the game with the cards. No. I think it was very much... I have since. I played a few times. I've got some friends in America who are actually like very into it. But they just always destroy me because they are very good and I am not. So I think I don't ever really have any memories of actually playing, competing or playing, with a deck and things. It was very much just similar. Like, again, I think it speaks to also what I mentioned about being attracted to the games because of that collecting aspect. So again, I think for the cards, for me, it was more about collecting all of the different cards rather than trying to build like a solid deck for competing or playing against friends and things.
That display you had behind you of your cards, when did you frame it and organise it like that?
So I did this around, I think it was a lockdown project. I think it was like 2020, 2021. I as I think a lot of people did, because I was living by myself in Oxford. And so as soon as I was able to, I went back to stay with my parents, because, when you're basically trapped in that environment, it's one of those where like a year earlier, super excited to have my own place, no longer having to house share. And then of course a lockdown, COVID happens and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had housemates. And so, So I actually went back home and lived with my parents again for 6 months, which was a very interesting experience at the age of 30. But no, it was good. And like, you know, sort of classic tidy out the childhood bedroom and the attic and find all my old toys, and then discovered, I knew the Pokemon card collection was there, but like actually like, you know, rediscovered it and then saw that I, you know, almost had a full set. I really should try and complete it, but the problem is Charizard's so expensive, and that's the main one I'm missing. There's a couple of others, but basically, like, yeah, I need to somehow... I don't think it's possible now to get hold of a Charizard that you're not paying a small fortune for.
Maybe, yeah. I think you can amass the others, and then Charizard will be its own separate project, or you just sort of get a Sharpie and draw your best impression of a Charizard and whack it in there as well. I think we'd all forgive you for going down that route. From doing your Oxford interview as an undergrad now to your PhD supervisor.
There's no way Paul is watching, but hi, Paul, if you're watching. So he's now retired. He's got to be... I think I went to his 70th celebration in like 2018. So I assume that means he's got to be pushing 80 now. So yeah, he's very much retired. I was like there was maybe another 3 PhD students after me, but I was very much towards the end of his career. But just, I just felt like, you know, when we were talking about these kind of like key life events and things for us to discuss, I think ending up with Paul as my supervisor was just like huge in terms of helping me not only as like an academic and figuring out my career, but also just like as a person. So I think I felt, you know, the sort of, maybe it's a bit cliche, but I think, you know, people talk about when you go to university, that's when you kind of really develop into almost like your adult self, right? Because you are like, I now have first years. They are literal children when they turn up, right? You don't think that when you're 18. You think, oh, I'm an adult now. I totally know. They are literal children. But then by the end, you know, if you're doing a 3 or 4 year degree, I think most people have a bit of a better idea about what do they really enjoy, like, you know, what things do they really care about, and they've sort of, you know, got a bit more of a direction perhaps. Not that you have to, because I'm not sure I did, but I feel like for me, that really happened during my PhD. So maybe it's because I knew in a sense that during my undergraduate degree, you know, once I discovered that I didn't know a PhD was a thing until my second year. I didn't know it was possible to basically keep studying and be paid to do so. And as soon as I discovered this, I was like, well, obviously I'm going to do that. Why would I stop studying maths if someone's going to pay me to keep doing this? And so I think maybe because I had that sort of idea, perhaps, you know, maybe it meant that I didn't like think too much about, you know, developing myself as an adult, let's say, as a human, perhaps because I knew I would have another 4 years of still figuring stuff out as a graduate student. But I think that really happened for me during my PhD. And I think a lot of that was sort of just like guided by my supervisor. And not necessarily because, you know, I mean, he was fantastic, but not because, you know, he necessarily was doing anything specific or being like more hands-on or offered more mentoring or guidance than anyone else. It wasn't that. It was just like the vibe. And it's kind of hard to describe, but like, I think the best way I could sum it up is I was teaching some undergrads, right? So as a graduate student, you get, and that's when I first got my experience of teaching, you do little supervisions, your little 1 hour, like me and 2 students talking through their problem set and the questions they couldn't do. And I think one of them just asked me and said, you know, who's your supervisor? And I said, oh, it's Paul Linden. And then one of them just went, oh, he's like the cool old dude who like comes into the lecture wearing red skinny jeans and looks great. And like, I feel like that actually just nails him in a nutshell, right? Like, it's just like effortless. He's just like, it's just like super chill, like clearly really smart, but also just like really like relaxed in who he is and very just kind of like, you know, like just does him and doesn't really think about other people. Not like doesn't think about other people, but you know, just that kind of like quiet confidence of just like I know what I'm about, and like, and you can just tell it's like an aura. And I think just that general vibe was just really good to be around, and for me worked really, really well in that kind of PhD student and supervisor dynamic. Because a lot of, I've had a lot of friends and colleagues who talk about their PhD experience, and unfortunately there can often be like conflict, and there can be issues between, whether sometimes their supervisor's like too busy and can't give them the time that they need, or sometimes the supervisor can be like a bit too demanding of what's expected of their graduate students. But for me, like, I think, again, without really realizing it, when I applied to work under Paul, like, he was coming to the end of his career and sort of had that reassurance of like, I've been there, done that. I've run the maths department in Cambridge. Like, I know, it just kind of that kind of just, it's all just kind of, it just felt very relaxing and reassuring. So it kind of worked for me, because I often would just not see him for like 3 months. But he sort of, he would check in, but not in like I'm checking in on you, just in like let me know if I can help, you got this kind of way. And it was just like really nice, because again, I've had colleagues and friends who wanted that relationship with their supervisor, but it didn't quite develop that way. So I think I was just very fortunate in that we were just like the perfect match. In terms of, he might disagree. He might say I was a nightmare, and he was like, he wanted to like, be like, Tom, do some work, or to show me what you've been doing, rather than But at the same time, if he was feeling that way, it never came across like that. I felt like he trusted that I knew what I was doing, and if they're actually, and I trusted that if it got to a point where there was like a problem, or he felt that I wasn't doing enough or whatever, then it felt like he would step in when needed. And I just don't think fortunately, we just never really got to that point, I do remember one time, though, he just, like, popped his head in the door, and he was like, oh, hi, Tom. He said, I haven't seen you in 4 months. And I was like, yeah, just been down in the lab. He's like, hey, cool. Should we chat about it next week? Maybe just to make sure that we're on the same page. I was like, yeah, that'd be good. But, yeah, it was just like, I think it was really helpful to have that level of, like, trust, from someone, obviously, like, so much more senior than me as a new PhD student, and it worked really well. So I think just generally, like, just really helped shape me as like a person and an academic in particular as well, because I try and take that kind of confidence and belief and trust in my students in the way I now deal with them myself.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure we all have our own stories about teachers who had a particular impact on us, and were just the right person for us at the time, and stoked the fire, and we found them so inspiring. And I'm sure, as you say, it's really paved the way for where you've gone since. And where does Pokemon come into this time, if at all?
Okay, so at university, my main Pokemon memory at university was like getting back into it properly. So this is when I did Gold and Silver. So I spent the summer teaching in China after my second year with a few friends, which was incredibly good fun. And basically we ended up, we were like, oh, well, we weren't sure about, like, entertainment wise. And so we all kind of, beforehand, we were like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we all got like some old school Game Boys and played like old school Pokemon games together. And so basically we all ended up getting Gold and Silver, and that's when I actually finally got to play through, I think I did Silver, but I finally got to play through Generation 2, having sort of skipped it. And then I think that was around the time, I think Black and White came out a year later. And so I remember pre-ordering that and literally getting, I want to say, a Nintendo DS at that point, I think, or maybe it was a 3DS. But anyway, I was so keen to get, the latest one, having like rediscovered my enjoyment of the games, that I specifically, spent my student loan on getting the console, and then pre-ordered. I think I got Black, and then played through that. So that was sort of the summer of my third year of university. Second year was playing Silver and Gold, and then third year playing, post exams, sort of just chilling for like several weeks and just allowing myself to like actually be able to relax and just play video games and play Pokemon. And I think that's when I really got back into the video games around there.
That's so interesting, because it was actually my sort of post A-levels treat to myself was Pokemon White version, so I think we had a similar experience in that sense. Exams done, and just rewarding yourself with actually getting invested in a Pokemon game again. Have you since been back to play the intervening generations 3 and 4?
I have. So, I think I'm trying to remember now. So I think my brother had platinum.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is that 4? I think that's generation 4,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. So he had platinum, and that actually leads really nicely into my 4th Pokemon.
Hey.
Because I remember playing that. So this might actually be around A-level time for me. So my brother had it, because I think he did a bit of a better job than I did of continuing to play through sort of like high school. And I think he got platinum, and then we were on holiday in France. We used to go to France every summer with the parents, and we would sort of stay in like a little chalet or like static caravan on a campsite. So it wasn't our own, but like, you know, the campsite vibe was great for us as kids, because, you know, our parents would just say, just don't leave the campsite, but otherwise we'll see you in 12 hours. Just like left us to it, and it was obviously a level of freedom. It was a lot of fun. And I remember one year, he had finished playing platinum, and I was like, I'll bring it anyway because I'll play it. And then I remember really getting into it, and so much so that, like, you know, on the odd day when my parents wanted to go out and do like a touristy thing, go and visit, you know, the local town, or I think this particular day we were like riding some little steam railway up like a hill or mountain nearby where we were staying. And they got like really annoyed at me because I just spent the whole day just literally like staring at my Nintendo DS or 3DS, whichever one it was, just playing Pokemon Platinum. And so yeah, that is sort of that was like a one-off. I remember actually, just literally it was just that particular vacation. I just got really into it and just like smashed through the whole game in that 2-week vacation, much to the annoyance of my parents. But for that reason, I was going to pick Giratina. So the cover creature, let's say, of Pokemon Platinum. I feel like obviously great Pokemon as well, very strong, very powerful. But you know, I feel like it sums up me sort of that like interluding period. I think where there was just like that one couple of weeks where just because of a particular situation, my brother had the game and I didn't, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to play this, and then it ended up taking over my holiday.
We've sort of gone from, I don't know, maybe 40 to 100 in terms of power levels, starting with Kingler and Butterfree and then going on to Zapdos and Giratina. Fascinating. Yeah. And also, the first 3 of your Pokemon are all Generation 1, and now we've got Generation 4 coming to the fray, so really are evolving through these generations here. But Giratina representing so perfectly your love and just that 2-week intense rekindling of your passion for Pokemon there. And now it's time to get into your introduction to media work with the Naked Scientists and, of course, starting YouTube.
Yeah, so this is post-PhD. So this is, I can remember it now, sort of in my second year of my PhD, or maybe it was third year, and we get a department email, you know, the maths mailing list. This email comes around, and it just says, classic being like, do you have plans for the summer? Do you want to spend your summer making science radio for the BBC? And obviously you're like, well, that sounds cool. Right? I feel like that is just the default reaction for anyone working in science. And so I ended up pinging off an application. And then I remember having a very intense interview where, very, very difficult. I was like given... it was good fun though, but like I remember sitting down and then they were like, right, in front of you is like it was a publication from Nature, and they were like, read that, you've got 5 minutes, and then I'm going to interview you about it as though you're live on the radio and, you know, the general public are listening. So I had 5 minutes to kind of digest and figure out what is actually the key, most interesting thing about this piece of research. They weren't expecting me to understand, you know, all the technical details, but it was like a really good fast test of like, can you read something very scientific and immediately see the right angle to sell it to the public? And it turned out that it was about, the paper was about how koalas keep themselves cool. And basically I remember pitching it and just, you know, sort of saying something like, you know, quite similar to that email, being like, have you ever wondered why koalas hug trees? It turns out that they literally keep themselves cool, right? They hug the tree to actually pass their body heat into the tree. And it's actually their main cooling mechanism in the summer. And so, like, you know, the paper didn't quite spell it out like that. Like, and that's slightly oversimplifying it. But, like, that was how I went. You know, I was saying, you know, like, the hook was, like, why do koalas hug trees? Because, you know, it's, like, kind of the famous thing that they do. So anyway, I as I said, I got the internship, and the idea was you spent 2 months doing this, so you took like a little break from your PhD, so they sort of like bought you out of your stipend for 2 months, so you just extend your deadline at the end by 2 months in terms of your funding, and it was just like really, really fun. Like really enjoyed it. They enjoyed having me, fortunately, and so I remember at the end of the 8 weeks, when you have the sit down with like the team and stuff, and I was like, they were like, well, what are you going to do after your PhD? It's going to be a year from now, you're going to have finished. And I was like, well, I don't really know, to be honest. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. And then we were like, well, maybe I could do something here, like I'd kind of introduced some maths content and it had gone down really well. So from their perspective, they were like, oh, maybe it would be good to get more maths content on the show and things. And so, yeah, sort of after like a few months, I managed to find some funding from various institutions and bodies, because the whole sort of organization was like run as like a not-for-profit kind of public engagement type initiative, and managed to get someone very kindly gave me the funding to do it for a year, with the idea of it like popularizing maths, and so then when I finished my PhD, that was the one real job I had for those 12 months, and what that kind of led to, having that job, was I'm spending all of my time researching and coming up with like math stories and things I could talk about on the radio. But then often they wouldn't make it into the show. I think first of all at the beginning, because I wasn't great at pitching compared to everyone else who'd been doing it for years. It was a steep learning curve. And then also just because sometimes you need visuals with maths. That's not to say you can't do maths on a podcast, but I think it's hard. Like sometimes you just need to see a graph or an equation, or like it's like trying to explain to somebody exponential growth when you can't just draw the really steep curve. It's just like, it's just so much easier when you've got a little visual. And so I think as a result, I'm putting all this work in, creating all these stories and all these content ideas, but then it wasn't getting on the show. So then I thought, well, why don't I create that visual? And so that's kind of how I accidentally ended up borrowing mum and dad's camera and like filming my first ever few YouTube videos, and as they say, the rest is history. So really found that I really enjoyed that. Fortunately, there was an audience for it, which of course helped. And so I did that for like 6 months alongside the main job with the Naked Scientists, and then it had sort of reached a point where that was coming to an end anyway, and I wanted to really commit to YouTube and the media stuff and Tom Rocks Maths, and so I sort of then decided, right, well, if I take a teaching job, I'll go back to Oxford and do a lectureship and teach the undergraduate students, then that's actually like a part-time job. It's like a 0.5 position, and then the other 0.5 of my time I can spend really developing and committing to YouTube and Tom Rocks Maths. And so, yeah, that's kind of pretty much what I've been doing ever since.
I guess the first thing to say is, at the time of recording, it's 1st of July, 2025. I think you and I could both do with some trees to hug, Tom. We could both do with some body heat
yes,
dispensation.
Hottest day in the UK. Yeah, hottest day in the UK so far.
So far. Well, noted. That's really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, doing the maths, YouTube is a form of teaching. At this point, though, had you were doing your PhD, so you sort of dipped your toe in the water of teaching undergraduates. As soon as you were up in front of that camera making maths YouTube videos, did it feel like just the natural next step?
I don't know about that. Okay. because if you go watch my first YouTube videos, and I don't watch them because I physically can't. They are terrible. But I'm not natural. I don't think I am anyway. I mean, you're always your own harshest critic. But like it's like anything. It took some getting used to. Now it's not a problem. Now I can just tell me tell me where to look and I'll talk to a lens. It's not a problem. But to start with, it was really weird and really awkward. But that aside, I think having an audience that wanted to learn maths and being able to get excited about it, I think that bit felt natural. The actual camera kind of filming myself stuff didn't feel natural. That took a good number of years before I was And even now, I'll watch a video from 3 or 4 years ago and be like, "Oh, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing there." But I think that's also to do with, evolving tastes and evolving styles and things as well, perhaps. But yeah, if you want to see something entertaining, watch some of my very old YouTube videos.
I love how you go to your very old YouTube videos as opposed to your most recent current content, because I mean it's all entertaining, but entertaining in a different sense.
It is all entertaining. Yeah.
So did it work out like that? Were you doing 0.5 of your time doing the academia and the other 0.5 doing YouTube?
Pretty much, yeah. So obviously, the YouTube stuff at the beginning was not in any way paid, right? Like, I think even I do a talk where I often do get requested this by students at university, and they want to know a bit more about, they're interested in science communication generally, and kind of like, social media. And I actually have like a slide which shows my earnings from 2021. So that's when I like went through 100,000, no, maybe 50,000 that year. But anyway, it was like at a point where my channel was like, let's say, established to a degree, and my earnings from like adverts were like $3,000, which is great. I'm not ever gonna complain at $3,000, but like, you're not. That's after a couple of years of releasing a video a week, kind of thing. So yeah, so there was kind of like an element of, I think if I didn't enjoy it, then it would have been really difficult to continue, because it was literally just a drain on time, effort, and money. Now it's a bit different. It's not that I make much more money, I don't, from YouTube adverts, but like you get like other opportunities come from it, right? And so also I think showing the establishing the channel and my audience, and the fact that a lot of the students I now teach literally like grew up watching my videos makes me feel old, but also is really like heartwarming, right? Like, they first watched me do a GCSE maths exam like 3 or 4 years ago when they were doing their GCSE maths exam. And now, they're here and I'm teaching them every week. It's kind of crazy. And that's their words, not mine, But anyway, but as a result of kind of, I think, building that profile, let's say, as of 2 years ago, so I'm now based in the Department for Continuing Education. We've just rebranded as Oxford Lifelong Learning. So this is where I have my studio, my office, where I am now, which is great because I have like a proper home for all my filming and all my kit. And also the department actually give me the freedom it's about 1.5 days a week of my university job is like to do YouTube related things. So, eventually it's kind of, now it's actually built into, obviously it takes way more than that, but it's now built into my actual position at the university. But, that took like many years of like hard work and really having to find allies within the university who actually saw the value in what I was doing. And realized that the university should be supporting me to do that. And those people do exist, because again, I get lots of people ask me about that. They say that they're often met with, unfortunately, they're met with people who just don't really get it. And I've come across lots of those people. I think you'll find it in any situation. But like you sort of, it's not easy, but you have to just keep at it, and eventually you will find, as I said, your allies, those people who do appreciate and see the value in what you're doing, and then, as I said, I've been able to now get this proper position, which is awesome.
Yeah. There's a question I wanted to ask you on this point coming into this recording, and that is, how does it feel having been an undergraduate and, getting your degree and working your way up, doing the PhD, where YouTube wasn't really a thing when you were going through that process and creating content, to now being in the position where you are still at university, but, in a teaching role as opposed to a learning role, and YouTube very much is, and you are such a big part of it. It feels to me from an outside perspective as like night and day, your experience of learning versus teaching now with YouTube being as established as it is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I don't think I never really thought about it in that way necessarily, because all the teaching I'm doing with my undergraduate students is still done in person, and it's still so whilst all of my content I'm creating online is of course recorded and done through video, I think the university aspect, my experience, my day job at the university is still in person with those students in the room. And even when I'm teaching an online class, which I do through continuing education, I teach a couple of online classes. Even then, it's the live class every week where it's me and the students chatting for an hour, on a Teams call. But it's still that actual interaction. So for me, that's what the university experience is, and that's like the big difference between, studying a subject at university and at an institution versus studying it sort of yourself in your own time. I think it's amazing that people can do that, and that's obviously sort of, especially as you're going through high school, that can help really ignite your passion in a subject, and then convince you to do it at university or to get that extra qualification or whatever it might be. But I think for me, going through that process with a fellow cohort of students where you're kind of chatting about it and you're actually like meeting up in person, having those discussions, that to me is like the best way to actually learn. So when people ask me and say, how do I learn online? Like, I'll definitely point them to resources, but my top tip would always be like, if you can, find other people who also want to learn the same stuff as you through, again, use social media for that purpose, right? The good purpose of connecting people. And then you want to actually create like your own little cohort where you all agree you're going to watch this lecture this week and then chat about it afterwards. Because I feel like the real learning comes when you talk to somebody else about what you've just consumed.
And the fact that, it's only the space of a few years in the grand scheme of things where we've gone from this education that can happen via videos being put out into the world, into the ether, versus being in person. Well, great, and now it's time to discover what's going to be Pokemon number 5 joining your dream team alongside Kingler, Butterfree, Zapdos and Giratina.
Okay, number 5 is Aegislash. Or Aegislash, I don't know how you say that word.
I'm going to go
how would you pronounce it?
I would say Aegislash.
Aegislash, okay, I'll say Aegislash. But yeah, I think I would have pronounced the hard A, but that's
fair
just
enough.
Me. Right, okay, so Aegislash, I have selected this Pokemon because it's sort of linked to a specific memory. So during my PhD, another really cool experience I was fortunate to have was I spent 6 weeks sailing around the Southern Ocean on a ship. So it was a research cruise. They use the word cruise, which is very loose because it's not a cruise, but you're on a giant ship for 6 weeks. We sailed around the Southern Ocean, mainly in Drake's Passage, also known as the roughest part of the sea anywhere in the world. And we were basically chasing storms because we wanted to get data about how mixed the ocean is. And the ocean is more mixed following a storm, because that's what storms do, right? The swell, the waves, it mixes together the layers of the ocean. Versus, if you allow it to sit and be still, then it settles into layers. And so, we were chasing storms for 6 weeks, which was a wild old experience. Zero regrets doing it, but I'm never doing it again. One of those, absolutely, if anyone happens to be watching or listening, if you ever get the chance to do a sort of prolonged period at sea in a research context, 100% do it. But you will either love it or hate it, and I did not in particular. Well, I was kind of in the middle, but anyway, I don't want to do it again. But during the shift, one of the jobs, we would rotate through jobs, and one of the jobs was basically you just had to stare at this wall of lights and make sure that something wasn't beeping that shouldn't be beeping, right? Because it was kind of monitoring all the instruments being towed behind the ship. And that was basically your job. So obviously you can do that whilst also playing on your 3DS and casually glancing up every now and then. And so that's when I played, I want to say it was Pokemon Y. So this would have been 2015. So I'm pretty sure Pokemon Y would have been out then, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think I was playing Pokemon Y. Again, it was sort of, I think that was the main memory of me as a PhD student, getting, my playing Pokemon. And I remember, catching this sword thing. Oh, I should also add, we didn't have internet on the ship. And so as you know, it's very tempting when you, like, for me at least, when I catch a new Pokemon and I know nothing about it, you, like, immediately look online to try and discover, is it good, is it bad, does it evolve, right? It's kind of, I would say it's a disadvantage of the internet age when it comes to that, because when I was a kid, I didn't have a clue. And it was kind of fun, that unknown. It was very disappointing when you trained something up to, like, level 60 and it still hadn't evolved. But this was kind of my experience on board the ship. And so the fact that, you know, you get your third stage evolution, and it has, I think it's the one, right, that has the two forms of, like, the attack and defense, right, for Edgy/Slash, and so I think that was just really cool, and so yeah, it just kind of stuck with me as, like, one of those, let's say, more modern Pokemon, because, like, I feel like originally they were all kind of were like animals, and then later on we kind of got more to, like, the object based ones, so, you know, it's like a floating sword with arms, but yeah, the fact that it was kind of you know, went through that third stage evolution and had these different forms and things, I just thought was very cool. And I think it was like Ghost and Steel. I don't know if it's a helpful combo, it just feels like a cool combo.
No, it's definitely a good combination. And it's interesting you say that about the object-based Pokemon, because, you know, we still have things like Magnemite, Magneton, we got Grimer and Muck, we got Voltorb, Electrode in Generation 1.
Yeah,
I think, right. I know what you mean. I think we have a tendency to associate the Generation 1 Pokemon, say, more with animals, but actually, when you look closely, they've kind of all been there, and Aegislash is definitely a fan favourite from Generation 6. You have had some incredible experiences, haven't you, Tom? I feel like we could record for like 10 hours, and you'd still have some thrilling adventures that you've been on to share.
I could talk a lot, yeah.
Yeah, storm chasing. Wow. I mean, that in itself could be a movie as well. There are about 5 movies that could be made out of all of the experiences you've had, I'm sure. But Aegislash joining the team. But before we round out this dream team, we will go from there now into, of course, Countdown.
Yeah, I mean, it was the only place to end, wasn't it? So as you mentioned in the intro, right, the reason we're having this conversation in a sense. Yeah, I think that was kind of the culmination. In terms of what you were just saying as well about, like, life experiences, right, that I never in a million years thought possible as someone who just gets far too excited talking about maths, to actually be able to, you know, to present Countdown for 3 weeks. You know, I was very fortunate. Rachel had a filming clash, and so I think I don't know the full story, but I think basically what happened was she was filming a different show, and it was, the dates couldn't be moved, and it wasn't possible to work around it, and so again, if I had to guess, I assume the production team contacted several people who are visible maths creators, you know, which it would make sense, right? If you're looking for someone who can talk about maths on a camera, you look for people already doing it. And I, you know, so I got this email saying, you know, would I be interested in a TV opportunity? And I get, you know, I wouldn't say lots, but these things come through fairly often for, I think, anyone working in like a video sort of content creation space. Usually don't amount to anything, but I was just like, yeah, sure, we'll have a chat. And then when we had the phone call and it was mentioned, you know, oh, this is Countdown, I was like, wait, what? Like, and I'd actually been fortunate enough, I filmed a video a couple of years ago with Rachel for National Numeracy Day, which is, National Numeracy is like a charity all about helping people who aren't confident with numbers to feel more confident with numbers. And we're both ambassadors for the charity, and so we filmed this sort of cool interview video together, talking about our experiences with maths and things. And so I just, you know, messaged her. You know, we followed each other on Instagram after that, and I just messaged her being like, please don't tell me you're leaving Countdown. What is this that I'm hearing? And then she was like, oh, no. She's like, don't worry, it's just a temporary thing. Like, it's just 3 weeks. And then she was like, also, you should totally do it. You would be fab. You know, and I was like, all right, well, you know, if Rachel thinks that I could do it, then I was like, sure. So then we did like, again, I'm sure there were lots of people that got this initial email, right? But then we did like a video call, which they recorded, I think, just chatting about maths and me and stuff. And I think that would have been shown to the producers and things afterwards. And then I think a group of us were then invited down to London. We never met each other because we got different time slots, and basically to audition. So you actually had to, you know, they put you in a mock-up studio. The music's blaring, and it's like, here's your numbers, you got 30 seconds, go, present your solution. And yeah, I think there was like 9 of them, and I think I got 6 or 7 out of 9, which I was pretty pleased with, because they were all hard, right? They didn't give you any easy ones at all, right? So I did practice beforehand, of course. because I saw it as a challenge, as something I wanted to be able to do. And then obviously it all worked out. I got the gig, and then next thing you know, a few months later, I'm filming for 15 shows, and then they got broadcast in February and March this year. And I don't think even now it's really sunk in that I was like on Countdown. Right? It's just such a British institution of a TV show that I think it's one of them where you just don't ever in any dream scenario picture yourself being a part of it, and yet somehow it happened. So yeah, I don't really know where I can go next, right? It's hard to know where to go next after that.
I'm sure there's all kinds of wonderful opportunities that await, and it just goes to show that you put yourself in, without realising it, you just put yourself in the right position at the right time. You were doing the things that you love to do, and you kept creating the content, and who knows what opportunities will come along. And it's hard to overstate, you said for your screen test, the music was blaring. It's hard to overstate just how iconic that music is over here in the UK for Countdown. You've got 30 seconds per puzzle in Countdown, and the music that plays during those 30 seconds culminating in bum. It's just ingrained into the psyche of everyone here. And a fascinating opportunity. I mean, looking back on it now, does it just... It was, at the same time, it was 3 weeks, so it was a good amount of time. But does it still feel like it never quite happened? Does it still kind of feel like a bit of a dream?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely, yeah. I think it's sunk in a little bit more now than, because I did quite a lot of media interviews and things around the time of when the shows were actually going out. And I think at that point it still didn't feel real. But I think now I've had a few more months, as it's kind of all died down a little bit, to sort of look back and think about that was a really, really cool thing to have done. So, yeah, I think it's sunk in a little bit more, but yeah, definitely. It's still, I think it's just one of those things. I'm sure everyone has their own version of what that might be, where it's almost like, it's sort of linked to what you do, but it's almost like so out there and so unique that you just wouldn't ever think of yourself of ever being able to have that chance, right? It's Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but... Yeah, it does. Those tangential things, I guess, that happen to strike at the right time. I guess my next question is that, is the vibe in that studio recording just as friendly and homely as it comes across as? Absolutely, yeah. Just... Everyone was really friendly, like, the whole team, from wardrobe... And, the lead wardrobe being like, I've looked through your Instagram and I have so many ideas for outfits. And he was like, do you trust me? I'm like, yes! I can't believe you've looked through my Instagram. Like, yes, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, go. In makeup, we were having a laugh about how I feel really bad because I've forgotten her name, but the lady who was doing my hair and makeup, her daughter knew who I was from YouTube, which is wild. We were just chatting about that, and we took a little picture together to send to her daughter because she was saying she didn't believe that her mom was doing my hair. She was like, Tom's hair is like a whole thing. There's no way he's letting you do it. So that was like a whole. But yeah, it was just very much like that. It was. I think there's a reason it comes across that way on the show and on the. Right, it is just it's very wholesome, it's very homely, it's very comforting, and I think by creating that environment in the studio, then that's why that comes across when you're watching it on TV.
Yeah, for sure. That's fascinating. I mean, as always, there are so many questions I could ask you here, but I'll limit myself to now just asking the follow-up of what's your favourite memory from that whole experience?
Okay, so my favourite memory has to be having the chance to do a very, very silly numbers solution. So there was this one particular puzzle, and I'll send you the link for this so that the viewers and listeners can have a look below, because it's on my YouTube channel. And it was just one of those rounds where the numbers come out. The total was 903, and you've got one large, I think it was 25, and you've got your 5 small. Right, and then you've got to use plus, minus, multiply, divide to make the total in the 30 seconds. And, no one got close in 30 seconds, right? We could all get, 900, the contestants and me. But then what happens when no one gets it, because if the contestants don't get it, then ideally I would present the solution as the expert. But some of them are just tough, and you just need more time. And so the way it kind of works is often the numbers round is followed by an ad break. And so you've got 2 minutes. So, you know, Colin, the host, would come to me and be like, have you got it, Tom? And I'd be like, not yet. Come back to me after the break. And so, you know, we pause for the break. And then 2 minutes later, the producer's like in my earpiece. He's like, right, we're coming back going again. Tom, have you got it? And I was like, you know what? I think I have. And he started like almost in disbelief. He was like, I don't mean to question you, Tom, but are you sure you've got this? Because what they do in the sort of booth upstairs, right, they have a solver open in front of them, right? So they don't help me at all. Like, they leave me to it, right? I'm on my own. But they, you know, can check that, you know, whether it is or isn't solvable, for example. Because some of them just aren't possible. So they always have a solver open. And, you know, so I'm like, yeah, I think I've got it. And he's like, are you sure you've got it? He's like, I don't mean to question, but are you sure? And I was like, yeah, it's horrible, right? And he was like, we've put it in the solver. There's one way to do it. And I don't mean to doubt you, but I don't believe you've figured it out. I was like, I think I've got it. So then he was like, all right, well, let's do it. Let's film it. So, you know, so we come back from the break. And then Colin's like, Tom, you've got it? I was like, yeah, I think I have. Like, it's literally the most horrendous puzzle I've ever seen, but I think somehow I figured it out. And then I proceed to, like, write out my solution. And basically, you end up having to go up to, like, 4,000 and something and divide by 5 to get down to the 900. And, like, yeah, just... At this point, I feel like everyone just needs to watch the video. Because, like, Colin's reaction as the host, as I, like, write the next line, is him just being like, what? What? Like, he's just in, like, complete disbelief as I just begin to write this whole thing out. So I think that's my favourite memory, just because it felt like, you know, it was just to have the chance where I got one, where the only way to do it was through a ridiculous method. Right? It just felt like, yeah, I felt fortunate. Because they only come around once in every, like, 100 rounds or something, where, you know, the only way to do it is to go silly. Because obviously that was my... You're never going to try and go in with a silly method when you're trying to solve it as an expert. But, you know, in those 2 minutes, I just tried everything else. I was like, well, let's try the silly method. And suddenly the silly method worked. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun just to be able to actually get that recorded on camera and go out on the show.
Yeah. I think I was watching as that happened. Live, as that episode was broadcast. Yeah, and it must have also just felt so good because you're proving your worth. I mean, I hope you felt very proud of yourself at that point, because it was, showing that you had the chops to be able to handle that crazy situation. Wow. Okay, well, now it's time to bring it back to the Pokemon. Let's discover what's going to be the final Pokemon rounding out your dream team.
Okay, final one is easy. So I gave a clue earlier when I talked about Pokemon Y. So it is literally, it's the cover creature again, Eviltal. I'm aware possibly not the most unique choice, but to this day, I have yet to find a more overpowered Pokemon in the game. Like I just remember, I mean, again, I might just not have played all the games with all the different Pokemon, but the move, I forgot the name of it, but it has a move where not only
Oblivion
does it just...
Wing.
That's it. It deals all of the damage and then also takes back, like, all of that as health. Right? It's just like, it's like the craziest, most... Because I remember, like, doing all of the, the Elite Four Pokemon League. I remember doing the whole thing without using, like, a single, like, potion. Because you just don't need to. All you had to do was just restore the PP. But otherwise, it was just use that move, dead, full health. Use that move, dead, full health. It was just, like, silly. But I just love, I don't know if that was by design or what, but, like, I just remember being like, this is almost too easy because of just how great this, like, how awesome this Pokemon is. I just thought it was a really cool Pokemon as well. And I have that one tattooed on my leg, also for that reason. So a good chunk of my team, 3 of my team I actually have as tattoos, so maybe I need to get the other 3 now.
I think so. I also think you need the plushies of each of them just behind you as your supporting dream team.
So okay, can you get every Pokemon as a plushie? Like, is it, in theory, do they all exist as plushies?
Yes is the short answer. They're releasing sort of year on year. I think we're up to Generation 7 now, in terms of, they're called the Sitting Cuties, so the smaller, like the ones behind me, versions of Pokemon. And so Generation 8 will come, Generation 9 will come, and so on. So it is possible, and all of the ones you mentioned, they will all be available at this point.
Well then, yeah, I think you're right. I do need to get the 6, the Dream Team. Tom's Dream Team needs to exist as a 6 plushie, yeah. Okay,
Evil Tower will be rounding out the Dream Team. Have you played any of the games since Generation 6?
I have. I've played all the way through. I only just started... I think I got Scarlet of the latest one. I only started that literally a month ago, so I'm not very far through yet. But I bought it when it came out, but it's just finding the time these days. I feel like every year it becomes harder and harder to find the time. But no, I have played at least one game all the way through from all generations. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
Very
maintained
nice,
that. Not necessarily in order, as we discovered with my going back to do Silver and Gold a bit later on and stuff. But yeah, I've played at least once through all generations now. Apart from the latest one, as I said, currently working through 9.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay. So just remind us then how old you would have been when you were playing through Y for the first time.
Pokemon Y, I would have been, let's say 24, 25.
Okay. Yeah. All right. But yeah, left an indelible impression on you. Incredible. Yeah. Well, this means, Tom, that your complete dream team is Kingler, Butterfree, Zapdos, Giratina, Aegislash, and Yveltal. So, I mean, of course, we've got a lot of Generation 1 representation there. The Generation 4 mascot, and then a couple of Generation 6 as well. It's interesting the clustering around those generations, given, as you say, you've played so many of the main series games. And then we've got a few flying types on there, actually, haven't we? We've got Zapdos and Butterfree and Yveltal. Got a couple of ghosts in Giratina and Aegislash. Then we've got... Kingler, who's here for fun as well. It's,
the crab,
really
the little
choices. Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, apart from those types I mentioned, pretty good diversity too. But now I have to ask you, Tom, if you had to choose one of these to be your partner Pokemon in the style of, Ash and Pikachu and so many others, which one would it be?
Butterfree. Easy question.
Butterfree.
Yeah.
Okay.
As I say, it was the first tattoo one that I got. It was my partner Pokemon in Pokemon Go. You can have the one that follows you around and whatever. It's just, I think I have the strongest bond with Butterfree because it's just every game I play, I just end up with a Butterfree, and I just think it's great.
It'll be interesting to see what happens for you in Pokemon Scarlet, because actually it's not in the game. The Academy line is not.
Yeah,
in
I'm gonna have to find an
alternative.
alternative like bug thing to evolve early on, aren't I?
Oh, you've got some options. And I'm sure you'll enjoy them all very much. It always finds its way in your team. Has it sort of just been a dawning realization that therefore it's one that's very special to you, or was it also a case of when you first saw Butterfree, you loved it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of them where it wasn't necessarily a really obvious choice for like a 7 or 8 year old boy to be your favorite Pokemon. And I think I kind of liked that. I think there is an element of like being a little bit contrarian or rebellious in elements of like me and my personality and things. And so I think I kind of also like the fact that, I wasn't just being like, what's the biggest, baddest, meanest? Which clearly I do like, right? Because some of the other ones I think are like more of that kind of style. But I think, there was just something about Butterfree being like, because it's kind of like cute. And so I just kind of like that almost like contrast that it's perhaps not what you would expect an 8-year-old boy to pick as their favourite. But it just resonated with me, I think. So, I think there's also an element of that as well.
Butterfree resonating with us too. So, Butterfree, you are Tom Rocks Maths partner Pokemon. And now a slightly different kind of question for you, Tom. If you were a Pokemon, what do you think you would be?
I'd have to be like a sort of, let's say, animated calculator. Right? Like, you can totally see a Pokemon that's a calculator with, like, little arms and legs or something. It had, like, moves where it, like, spat, like, numbers at you or something. I don't know. I feel like there's something you could do there. I feel like that would be me.
But does it very enthusiastically as well, I feel like. I think... So when I asked that question, I mean, like, of the Pokemon that exist, what would you be? But I think we have a fairly strong contender. Because Metagross is known as this walking supercomputer, which I feel like could fit the Tom Rocks mask quite well.
Yeah, I would take that. Metagross is cool. Yeah, no, I would be happy with that comparison. I like it. Yeah, or like one of the Porygons as well, maybe.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Could be quite because like the angular nature, it's quite geometric. I think that could be quite a nice one as well. Nice link there to the maths.
I was also thinking maybe Porygon Z actually kind of glitching out. It kind of represents your enthusiasm for it all. I can picture you just sort of going overdrive with the thrill of maths that you're trying to portray. I think those are really good options. What do you all think? Do you agree that of all the Pokemon there are, Tom Rocks maths would be a Porygon, one of the Porygon line, or a Metagross? Let us know in the comments. We'd be fascinated to read. Speaking of you all, it's now time for your community questions. I posted online, as I always do, asking for questions for Tom. Thanks so much for submitting them. I apologise I won't be able to feature all of them, and I apologise if I mispronounce any of your names or handles. So, to kick things off here, Luke Alex Davis would like to know, what's a mathematical theory or equation you never expected to find in Pokemon?
Ooh, that's a good question. To be honest, I think just like the simple the dynamics of like the catch rate formula. I think like I made a video about this and did like a very big deep dive into Generation 1 because it's the simplest one to understand. And just, I think to me it was just really cool to see quite advanced concepts used in that formula. So for example, the fact that it uses the floor function to make sure you always get an integer value. It's just something I wouldn't have first thought about. As soon as you see it, you're like, well, obviously it has to do that because it needs, you know, an 8-bit answer. And so they have to be integers because it doesn't have the storage and all that. But like, yeah, so I think just those kind of neat little... There's a lot of cool elements within the catch formula, the catch rate formula from Generation 1. So the floor function is cool. The fact that it uses like the maximum of 0 and whatever value to make sure you don't go negative is also just like a clever like little technical detail that again is just making sure that you're not going to break the game. So yeah, I think just... I'd say generally that formula, but just those other like more advanced mathematical concepts and functions like creeping into the formula, I thought was really nice to discover.
Yeah, it is unbelievable how deep these games go, and just what we see playing through the game is the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the functions that go into them. Thank you very much. Fascinating question, Luke. Okay, next question here from Billa VGC, aka Barish Akshosh, Pokemon video game competitor. Would you consider competing in the competitive video game or trading card game or Pokemon Go or Pokemon Unite, for that matter, in some of the UK events we have?
I mean, I'd give it a go. I feel like I wouldn't be very good. Because I've seen, you know, I do occasionally stumble down the YouTube rabbit hole of watching, like, actual people competitively playing. And it's kind of... Because I'm one... Like, when you're playing the games yourself, at least in my experience... and you're just playing through, like, you know, the main storyline and whatnot, like, you don't really need to use the non-attack moves, right? You can, but you don't really need to. It's like, if you struggle, you just go and fight a load of wild Pokemon, go up 3 or 4 levels, and you come back and you win next time. Like, so, at least that's what I did. So I feel like, as a result, I'm not particularly well-versed in, like, the strategy element, right? So, you know, like, using things like Swords Dance, which is clearly a great move in those kinds of settings. It's not something I would ever use in the game when I was playing, you know, single player. And then maybe that's the same. Maybe everyone else who actually plays competitively also wouldn't use it in the game because you don't need to. But I think I'm just missing so much of that knowledge that I just get destroyed by, like, any relatively competent player. But I think I would love it, and I think it would be really fun. But I would need, like, you know... You'd have to go easy on me, or you'd have to, like, give me some tips beforehand to, like, you know, like, beginner, like, guide to, like, the obvious things I should be aware of when it came to competitive playing. And the same with the trading card game, right? I pick the ones that I think are cool, rather than, like, I wouldn't know how to build a balanced deck and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So, again, as long as I got a bit of guidance, I'd love to, because I think it'd be really fun.
I mean, it's something I could help you with, Tom, if you would be interested. And it could make for good content on your channel as well. I know that in January, we've got a Birmingham Regional Championships, January 2026, and then in February, the European International Championships, which will be at London at the Excel Centre. So, food for thought would be fascinating.
Would I have to qualify, though?
Continue.
Could I actually just turn up and play, or would I need to qualify?
No, you can just turn up and play.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe I'll think about that. Maybe that could be my new project, right? Is like a video diary of like Charlie teaching me how to do this stuff. Okay, no, I like that. I appreciate the offer. I'll have a think. Might take you up on that one.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Thank you very much for that question, Billa. Now, a question from Jamie Boyd. Now, Jamie Boyd is a fellow commentator for the Pokemon video game like me, also a maths teacher, and he's also a competitor, of course, for the video game too. So he would like to know, as a fellow maths educator, Jamie has tried to sneak Pokemon into lessons before. Have you ever done the same? And if so, what's your favourite way you've managed that?
That's a good question. I don't think I've managed yet to get it in a university lecture or a tutorial. But I quite literally go and do a talk in schools and at festivals and events called The Maths of Pokemon. So so I debuted this talk about a year and a half ago at New Scientist Live, the sort of big event in London, and as a result I've probably done it now maybe like 50-60 times. I'm doing it this weekend at Comic-Con in Sofia in Bulgaria, which is going to be super fun. So I haven't used it yet in like a university setting, but absolutely in a school setting, and it's very much like just taking so I talk a little bit about the catch rate formula, and getting the students to think, well, why do we need a floor function? Why can you not have negative numbers? So that's kind of tapping into a little bit like computer science and coding. And then also sort of like postulating silly questions like, if I had a pet Charizard, how many hamburgers would I have to feed it per day? For example. And then it turns out that that's actually like, it's basically baby mathematical modeling, right? It's like, here's a situation, you have to approximate things, you have to estimate things, and try and come up with an answer to that kind of question. So that would be my recommendation. If it's, if you're trying to fit it in, is you can just, as I say, I just come up with any random old question related to a Pokemon, like the Charizard hamburger one, and then it turns out that there's lots of skills that you need to actually be able to answer that question.
I love how Jamie's question about like, how have you tried to sneak it into your lessons, but the way you do that, just I just put it in the title. Let's just go all in. Let's talk about the maths of Pokemon. Yeah. And I mean, a good thing about feeding Charizard hamburgers is you don't have to do the barbecuing yourself, do you? Charizard can do that, can do the cooking as well. So a handy Pokemon to have around the kitchen. Thank you very much for that question, Jamie. Now, final question here from Omega Squared on Instagram. This person has had a previous attempt at a DPhil in maths and had to bow out. Any advice on how to rekindle that passion?
That is a good question. And I think actually I can tie it back into Pokemon, because I think it's about, when I talk to anybody who isn't as enthusiastic about maths as I am, right? And it sounds like this person might be in a similar boat, for they've lost that passion or that love. It's about finding, like, rekindling it. Or if you don't enjoy maths, it's about doing maths in a space that you do enjoy. So for example, right, if you're a Pokemon fan but you don't like maths, then it might be looking at and taking some inspiration from some of the ideas I've mentioned here and that I talk about in my videos, where rather than posing a random maths problem about, like, I don't know, how many watermelons does Gary have, it's actually where it's a generic Gary, not the rival Gary. Got Pokemon on the brain, right? How many watermelons does Charlie have, right? Then you can turn it into, how many hamburgers am I feeding Charizard? And then it's kind of potentially going to be more interesting, and you're going to be a bit more excited about it, because it's like, it's already in an area you are interested and passionate about. So I think, whilst I often talk about that in terms of getting people to be less scared of maths and to engage with it, it's like, bring it to the things that they enjoy, bring maths there rather than trying to take them across to maths. I think a similar thing could be true, if for someone who's tried to do a DPhil and kind of lost their way, lost their passion. It's almost like trying to think back to what are the things that made you want to do a DPhil in the first place, and can you go back and just start doing those things? Not with a goal of trying to necessarily get back into doing a DPhil, but just with a goal of trying to re-find your enjoyment of the subject, right? So it's like, if for some reason you were to fall out of love with Pokemon, then it's like saying, well, you know, the reason I first fell in love with this game is because I played Pokemon Red. So then, you know, go find your old Game Boy Pocket and play Pokemon Red and re-fall in love with it all over again. So I think something like that, in like the maths context, think about why do you really enjoy the subject before the whole DPhil experience, and then try and actually just rekindle that enjoyment and that passion. And then, but without, you know, it's easy to say, but without necessarily like, you know, like a pressure and expectation that it's going to get you back into the DPhil. Just concentrate on enjoying it first, and then sort of see where that goes.
Yeah, that's really wonderful advice. Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much for all of your questions there. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, then you can give me a follow at Chazingdra on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and of course YouTube. That's where I post the call-outs for questions for my guests. I would love to hear what you'd love to hear. Okay then, Tom, so we've heard a lot about you up to now, but what's next for you?
Oh God. Well, as I said, I'm going to go do this Comic-Con talk, which I think is going to be really fun. I've done the Pokemon talk many times, but never to a literal Comic-Con event and Comic-Con audience, so I think that will be a good experience for sure. And then what else am I doing? Oh, and then my big trip this year in August. So I'm going trekking in the Himalayas for 2 weeks. Sort of going to do with my brother and our friend. So the three of us travel quite a lot together, and we've decided this is the year we're going to attempt Everest Base Camp. Not Everest. Wow. I like being a mathematician. I have seen the statistics around survival rates of trying to summit Everest, and I have no interest in trying to do that. But you know, base camp 5,300 meters, I think is potentially achievable. You know, we've done a bit of training ourselves. We recently climbed Ben Nevis, for example, up in Scotland. Not that that's anywhere near as high, but you know, it was quite an intense day of hiking. So we're going to try and do like I mean, it'll be beautiful regardless, just generally being in the Himalayas for 2 weeks. But yeah, with the sort of, on like day 10, we hopefully will make it to base camp, which will be lovely. So at least get to see the big mountain in the distance. But as I said, I personally have no interest in actually trying to climb it. Like, to me, the risk is not worth it. But that's the mathematician in me talking.
Yeah. No, very exciting plans indeed. That's fantastic. And of course, we'll keep a close eye on you achieving your 100 countries. And in terms of your content as well, what's next in terms of that? Is it continuing doing the same things you're doing? Do you have other plans in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not too dissimilar to this idea of like collecting, right? I've accidentally become like, I guess, this exam video series I have where I'm now taking, I started by doing, you know, GCSE maths and A-level and further maths, and then the IB. And then it kind of evolved, and then I tried, you know, some of the American exams. I've done a German exam. I've just recently recorded a Turkish exam. So I think I'm just starting to like slowly just try maths exams from different countries and different, you know, curriculums around the world. So I think I've been saying this for a while, but I think I would really like to commit to that and actually, you know, really almost like properly, like, again, try and collect and try it every time I do a new one, actually try and do a different country. Because every time I've done it, it's been fascinating to see what is taught in each country and also how the concepts are presented at that kind of 16 to 18-year-old level. So it's fun. They take a lot of time and effort to edit. That's what puts me off. I enjoy doing them, but then it takes me like 2 weeks to edit them. Which is the problem, because you know, putting all of the overlays in and everything and the paper so people can see it clearly and stuff, and they're all like 2 or 3 hours long as well, which means it takes forever. But yeah, I think that would sort of be, I think, the continuation and maybe expansion of that project to really try and, like, you know, maybe once a month I'm doing a different country's exam could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Absolutely, and of course, the more you do them, hopefully, the swifter they will get to edit. But yeah,
I don't know about that.
Wonderful.
My experience so far has
we
not.
Believe, Tom.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
We'll have to see. But very exciting indeed. And our final question for you, Tom. Looking back from now, was a very successful maths content creator, all the way back to the young Tom, who year 4. Would stay up late doing those maths problems in their bedroom, playing Pokemon Red while their brother had Pokemon Blue. What advice would you give to that younger version of you?
Oh god, that's a question, isn't it? I mean, I think again, it's obviously easy to say given the crazy ridiculous year, in particular with the countdown stuff that's happened to me. But like, I don't think I would have necessarily any advice other than like keep doing what you enjoy doing, because that's what all this has been. Was just realizing that I just enjoy talking about maths, right? And sort of not letting the fact that I had no experience whatsoever of using the camera, no editing experience, no experience of talking to a camera. But I was like, but you know, I enjoy doing it, and I'm just going to throw myself into it, and I'm going to learn, and every video I make, I'm going to try and make it a little bit better than the last one. And so, yeah, I don't think I would necessarily, it would just be that. It would just be to kind of, you know, if you want to stay up all night solving multiplication problems, you stay up all night solving multiplication problems. If you want to steal your brother's Gengar in revenge, you go and steal your brother's Gengar in revenge. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's thrilling to hear that actually your advice would be just keep doing what you're doing. And it's wonderful that, you know, it's paved the way for where you are now. And it's definitely a way not to have those regrets. Wonderful that you're able to just forge your own path. And I guess you are a manifestation of the lesson that is to be learned in just immerse yourself in what you enjoy, no matter what it is, you know, within reason, and incredible things can come from it. So thank you so much for that, Tom. And the chat's not in there because now I'll be getting into Tom Rocks Maths Rapidash round, 15 or so minutes of bonus questions that Tom has not prepared for. And as with all my guests, there are so many more things that I want to take a deeper dive into. What is Tom's favourite Pokemon tattoo? We haven't talked too much about the tattoos at this point, but Tom does have quite a few of them. I'm looking forward to hearing. And if it's the Butterfree, what's the second favourite Pokemon tattoo that Tom has? And if he has any plans for further other games that Tom enjoys. You mentioned the PlayStation 2 earlier on. How would you sell maths to someone else? How would you sell it? How would you make them realise how fun and interesting it could be? Advice for creators and so many more. If that would be of interest to you, then you can become a YouTube channel member where you also get access to 4 bonus videos per month as well as plenty of other perks. Or you can buy the Rapidash rounds individually on my Patreon. Fundamentally, really appreciate the fact that you've listened to or watched this episode in its entirety. The links will be below if you want to hang out with me and Tom for a little bit longer. But Tom, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been so fascinating to talk to you, and you know, on a personal level, having not seen you for 10 plus years now since university, wonderful to reconnect as well and just get an insight into so many incredible things. So thank you.
my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Very pleased you enjoyed it. And if people want to keep up with you online, where can they find you?
It's just Tom Rocks Maths on literally every social. I got it tattooed on my arm there at Tom Rocks Maths. So once you've committed to that, right? Anytime a new social platform appears, I have to get that username. So fortunately, it is the same on all platforms.
Tom Rocks Maths, go and check out the incredible content and now some YouTube spiel from this side of things. Once more, everybody, if you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. Would mean a massive amount. Put a lot of hard work into these, so it would be wonderful to know if you're enjoying them. And do drop a comment, because Tom, as with all my guests, has given us so much food for thought. Would love to know your thoughts on the episode. And there are more than 60 episodes of this podcast at this point, with all kinds of guests, people in the competitive Pokemon space, people in the more casual Pokemon space, YouTubers, the works, and plenty more exciting guests in the pipeline. To spread the word about the show, you can use the hashtag 6Pokemon1Life There's bound to be something for everyone. And also on my channel, I vlog the events that I cast as a commentator for the Pokemon Video Game Championship Series. I make silly Pokemon flavoured comedy skits. I stream competitive, more casual play, Nuzlocks. If you're a fan of everything that the Pokemon video games have to offer, then my channel is the place for you. Discord community link below. Chazingdra@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me. And episodes of this podcast drop every Wednesday. I'm at Chazingdra across all socials. And with that being said, Tom, it's now time to get into your Rapidash round. So if you're not joining us as a YouTube channel member or on Patreon for that, then it's goodbye from Tom. It's goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, 1 Life Story.